Hi all, and welcome to the final day of the virtual McCormack Sport Leaders Forum presented by our title sponsor, Scout Sports and Entertainment. We are looking forward to ending these past few days on a high note as we have had a lot of wonderful speakers for you. Thank you to our sponsors who are powering each of our sessions, our incredible advisors, the McCormack Department of Sport Management, and especially all of you for showing up, being ready to engage with our speakers today. As we wrap up this year's forum, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank our fellow committee members. We are so grateful for each and every one of our McCormack Sport Leaders team who has worked tirelessly on this event this past year. We could have not done it without any of you, and you should be proud of all the hard work you've done. A big thank you to Brendan Clark, Morgan Price, Tia Dawson, Noah Kramer, Demaya Mongru, Jahan Bertra, Emma Dennis, and Marissa Randall. Now, on to our keynote today. Our keynote speaker is Howie Nuchow, who is the co-founder of Creative Arts Agency, or as you know, as CAA, and the moderator is Abe Madkour, who is the editor-in-chief at Sports Business Journal. Thank you again to our title sponsor, Scout Sports and Entertainment. Now, let's turn this over to Abe to get started.
Well, thank you, Maddie. Good to see everybody. I wish we were together in a great amphitheater at UMass and Amherst, but this is just as good, and I'm really thrilled to be with you for the next hour and to have Howie, who I know you have a strong spot in your heart, Howie, for the University of Massachusetts in Amherst.
Yes, thank you also. Thank you to all of UMass for having me do this. It is a pleasure, and I also wish I could be back at in a classroom there and grabbing a slice of Antonio's pizza. Would have been nice.
Does it feel like yesterday, Howie, you were sitting in probably a classroom in Amherst and just wondering, what the hell am I gonna do?
Yeah, I can remember that feeling so well. And one of the reasons I was looking forward to today, I literally remember it so well that I remember thinking when I saw a speaker, I wish they could help describe exactly what they went through. And everybody that came in to speak, I recall thinking, they're so successful, they're so great, they make it seem so easy. I'm so unprepared, no matter how much I worked in school and class and even had a job lined up. And so I'm looking forward to sharing what I am, because it does, I literally feel like I was there yesterday with these same thoughts.
So let's put you back into that space. Like, what was going through your head? Where did you think your first step or place would be after college?
It started through my sports management classes. I knew the importance of an internship, and in my sophomore year, I did probably a very lazy version of just sending out letters, no follow-up, just sending letters, and was shocked to find that nobody called back. And then I realized that's really on me. You know, I'm not putting in enough of the effort to go do things, to use my network, to ask, to follow up, to make phone calls. And during my junior year, I was lucky enough to get an internship at the New Jersey Nets, one that changed my life, but I worked hard. I probably made 35 phone calls to the internship, wrote letters, and so I wasn't going to repeat mistakes I made my sophomore year. I found a few former interns. A friend of mine at UMass, brother, had interned there and had them send letters to the internship director. And so I realized, okay, I could name at least a little bit out there rather than a random Vine letter. So I got an internship at the New Jersey Nets. That wound up changing my life, because part of that internship, I wound up picking up somebody. I do airport runs, and I wound up picking up great sports marketers of our time, a guy named John Spolstra. And John was hired by David Stern, told the Nets to hire John as a consultant. And I hit it off with him right away. And when I would pick him, we would just talk. I was a super curious person, would ask him a million questions about what he was about to do. And the other big lesson I learned in my internship was, even though my role and responsibility, there weren't computers at the time. So if there was a season ticket letter that was going out to the season ticket base, we would fold the letter, hand address the envelopes, and they'd all go out. and everybody took it as really menial work. But I looked at it just a little different. I was like, I'm going to meet the person who wrote this letter. I'm going to go talk to them. Why are they writing the letter they did? What's the purpose of what they're attempting to do? And just would go around having these conversations and curiosity. When I would then talk to John about those things, that was, while it was natural for me just as an instinct, they really took that as he's different than the rest of the other interns. And those were big lessons because, again, that little bit of curiosity separated you from everybody else who was saying this job is the worst. All we do is hand addressed envelopes. I was finding the business reason to remain curious there and realize the effect it would have on somebody like John, who is always looking for curious people.
A couple good lessons there, Howie, that I want you to kind of to elaborate on for the students. One, really willing to do whatever it takes when you first get into the business. And like you said, you were driving to the airport, you were picking people up, you were handwriting envelopes. And I know that that's the way to get in. And sometimes people have a very glorified vision of what working in the sports business could be. So I just think, one, doing whatever it takes, but also two, having a curiosity. Because as long as I've known you, Howie, you've always been full of curiosity and questions.
Yeah, I think it's the only way to get better. And I think, back to John and what that curiosity led to, it's the other lesson that I learned. If you find the right champion, somebody who wants good things for your career, somebody who believes in young people, somebody who notices what might be able to, that's what you want to latch on to. That is what you want to search for. And it's not going to be everybody. And just because there might be, if that office was filled with 50 people, there might only be 3 that might want to help and be champions the way you want. But that's what you want to concentrate. You don't want to get disenfranchised by somebody who might be a naysayer, an average worker. You want to find the people who really do great things. And I latched onto John because I loved how he thought. He wanted to blaze new trails. He was interested in young people. He was willing to teach, willing to provide access, willing to talk and give lessons too. So that curiosity got rewarded. You want to find that person who rewards curiosity and lessons.
As a side note, why don't you tell the students who John Spoelstra's son is?
John Spoelstra's son is Eric Spoelstra, who is the head coach of the Miami Heat and the only client I represent personally myself. And that's as a absolute, it would take 3 lifetimes to pay John back for anything all the things he did for me in my life. And Eric's an amazing person.
And another great story for the students there is loyalty. So Howie, you did the internship, but then you went back to the Nets. And talk about a little bit, Nets organization at that time was not a marquee, well-run organization in the Meadowlands.
No, and it was the other. So I went back with a kind of interesting story. So John, after my junior year, I was dropping him off for the last time, going to head back to UMass for my senior year. And John's final words to me were, stay in touch. So I thought John and I were boys. So I would call him after Sundays, every week, Sunday nights from UMass, and there was a great party down at Southwest Dorms and this and that, and we, tailgating was great this week. And he took it that, wow, he's so aggressive. He's calling me. I really thought we were friends, So, but I also realized, I'm like, wow, that's different. He's like, look at this kid who's calling me at home on weekends. So I went back to UMass, having no idea what I wanted to do, and once I graduate. And that reality was really starting to hit me, even though I did an internship, which was good, but I was ready for my senior year and in classes. And I didn't know what inspired me at the time. Again, thankfully for John, one of the things he did for me when I was the intern was he took me to some meetings in New York City where they were creating a league called the Hawaiian Winter Baseball League. With a bunch of minor league baseball owners. And so when I was graduating, John called me out of the blue and said, hey, I'd like you to apply for a job at the Nets. And I'm like, Nets, I kind of want to do that Hawaii thing that you're working on. He's like, no, you should apply for a job at the Nets. I'm like, no, I want to do the Hawaii thing. He's like, dummy, apply for a job at the Nets. I'm going to be named president there, and I'm really going to create a new model here. He goes, but you have to get the job yourself. He's like, so now I really had to think. And there was a guy named Jim Leahy, who was the vice president of sales. And I remember the same thing I did to get my internship. I said, I got to do things that are different. And so Jim did not want to hire me because he knew that he was kind of being told about somebody. So now there was an extra layer. It wasn't working in my favor because Jim and John weren't that close at the time. So I wound up making a bunch of calls and then wound up buying 8 basketballs, and I put them in a gigantic box, and I wrote messages on each one of the basketballs and sent that to Jim, and Jim called and he's, okay, you got me. He's like, now, because he was there, I think, when I was an intern. And so he's like, that one broke through for me. He's like, you have the job, which wound up being amazing. You realize, again, the extra step was always something different. Tells the story all the time how we received this outlandish package because it was huge and my roommates were helping me build it. And that was another thing to say, you had to separate yourself. And then I got the job, but as a senior in college, I was scared beyond belief because I knew we were going to now start calling on businesses. And so I'm 21 years old and I know I'm about to call on mortgage companies and title insurance, and I don't even know what they do. I don't know what a mortgage company is. I don't know what a title, I don't know what a tool and die shop is. And so I was as scared can be. And I remember sitting in the driveway of the house we grew up in and just saying, I will never be able to afford a house. I'm like, this will be the last house I ever live in. How did my parents do it? And so the natural fear, which became, I think, an ongoing thing in my life of never being settled. I'm not settled now, with all the things that we've done. I think that became a driver. I was so afraid to be exposed for not knowing what the mortgage company, that I think I threw myself into understanding those things faster and faster, and it remains a drive in my life. So that fear, if you have it out there, it's so normal and nothing you should worry about. You should embrace it and just use it as fuel to figure out the ways to overcome it.
Well, let's fast forward gradually, because that fear of failure, I think, probably stayed with you through the Nets. Then you go on to Mandalay and you work in minor league baseball, and you continue to acquire skill sets, responsibility, oversight, management of people. And of course, that leads you to your track to where you are now at CAA Sports.
Yeah. I'll go back to this. I think it's important for people, especially the audience we're talking to, who are young in their 20s, and they're going to start out. So in my first job at the Nets, John hired 30 young people. And in the first year of selling tickets, I was 30th out of 30. And I could have easily been fired. And I had a territory that was 2 hours away and much further than other people's, but I was in super early. I would come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, start making cold calls at 7:30, then drive 2 hours out to my territory to try to sell. And even though I wasn't succeeding, I never stopped trying. I'd ask a million questions, and John made sure I kept my job. Next year, I improved. They moved my territory a little closer because of the work ethic. And I also had all these ideas. And I realized real quick, nobody wants to hear my ideas. And when I was the salesperson and thing, the next year I moved up all the way to number 1. And it was the work ethic, and John saved me. And now my ideas mattered. And it was very simple to start to correlate, going, okay, if you contribute to the company, your voice matters. I was no smarter a year later, but I had earned the right to have my voice heard. And that was a big deal. So for next 2 years, I remained one of the top ticket sellers. And I was able to continue with that curiosity because I started to create and invent different programs, a speaker series to have one of the coaches of Notre Dame, Lou Holtz, who was a big deal at the time, come speak before Nets games. And we just took motivational speakers and we created events before the game ever started for companies. And we were able to move 10,000 tickets. And it was different because the Nets were a terrible basketball team. But at the time, it was so great to work there because you really had to work extra hard rather than where all my friends wanted to work with the Knicks because they were so exciting, selling out every game. But you weren't really learning sports marketing by being with the best that it was easy to go sell and sell out the entire Madison Square Garden. So I realized also, wow, I'm really lucky that the Nets are the 8th best franchise in the marketplace because I'm really, really learning. And so that became a big deal. And then by the time I was 26, 27, John left the organization. And so that was a big blow for me. And John gave me the advice. He said, you know, I don't know, a company called Mandalay called me. Sorry, a company called Mandalay called, and they were in minor league baseball. I called on, I said, I'm getting a little stagnant. He said, well, I don't know if this is the right job for you, but it's time for you to make the jump. Once you feel stagnant, that's when you have to move. He's like, or else you'll lose your curiosity, you'll settle in, you'll lose that fire. And he said, minor league baseball is a thing. You'll feel like it's a step backwards because I was going from, at that time, I was a vice president at the New Jersey Nets, but I wasn't the one in the room talking to mayors, dealing with, you know, how to build a building. And so in minor league baseball, even though, again, it seemed like a step backward, I thought, I could have access to the same process to build a stadium, whether it's in Dayton, Ohio, or building SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. You're having the same conversations, just the zeros are different. So I realized that at a young age, while scared, because all I had ever really done is sold tickets, and ignorance became the best thing for me. So a guy named Peter Guber, he started to recruit me to a company called Mandalay. Mandalay at the time owned, I think, 3 minor league baseball teams, or 3 minor league baseball teams and a minor league hockey team. So I went out there. I wound up accepting a job, moved out to California. Again, scared as can be, not knowing. It wasn't like I was making a ton of money, but I thought.
From Jersey to California.
From New Jersey to California, having never been there, and started minor league baseball. And within a few months, Peter Guber called me and said, when I met you, you were bouncing off walls. You had all these ideas. You were super passionate. You were super curious. And you seemed to be slowing down, and it's early. And at the time, I just thought, some of the people that were there at the company weren't really encouraging the ideas. I thought we could be $100 million company. And they're like, I'd settle for 10 million. And so I just had these dreams. I'm like, I moved out to California. I think we could do it. Now, mind you, I don't know anything. I'm 26, 27 years old. I just have dreams. And this was another lesson I learned. So Peter called me back 4 days later. And Peter, and people who might know, he owns the Golden State Warriors. He was, at the time, a very successful movie mogul at Sony, spun that off and had his own company called Mandalay on the Sony lot. And now he owns part of the Dodgers, the LAFC team. He's an incredible business person. So he's the first real mogul I was meeting in my life. So when he was calling and taking an interest, he said, okay. He called me 4 days after that conversation. With what I'm about to tell you, you could run back to New York or New Jersey and cry, or you could be the captain of your own rescue. He said, I fired the president. You're now the president, and let's build a company. So I was now 27, president of this company. I'm like, my mouth has got me in big trouble now, because now what do? I've only sold tickets. But same thing, like investigating the mortgage company. I was like, now I will learn everything. I'll put on a brave face, just keep moving forward. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying, he's betting on me. It must be for some reason, not a reason I could see. But that became, again, now I have a second amazing mentor in my life who's betting on a young person for the same reasons. When you get older, you start seeing these traits in young people. And when you're at the age of the audience that we're talking about, you don't even realize you have it. But when you can talk to adults in a mature way, when you come in the room and you can talk to Abe Madkour the same way you can your roommate, that stands out to people in the business. And so when you could be as comfortable with the people you're interviewing with or your bosses, it's very noticeable. And that was the answer John gave. I'm like, why did you take an interest in me? And his answer was, you talk to me the same way you would somebody else. And that shows something.
So a lot of great things there for the students that you've had a couple of themes throughout, Howie. Like you said, champions, mentors throughout your professional career. 2, fear of failure is a good thing because it drives you to work harder and to understand things that you may be unfamiliar with. 3, when you feel stagnation in a career, it could be time to reinvent yourself or to remotivate yourself to try something different. And sometimes ignorance is okay. And so now you very successful at Mandalay. You had a number of minor league baseball teams. From our purview at SBJ, you were the most successful minor league team operator in the business. Were you ready for another challenge at the end of that time?
Yes. And the time at Mandalay, another thing, which really prepared me for the next step in CAA. At Mandalay, what we decided to do was we were launching a team in Dayton, Ohio. And we had a mantra saying anything short of being the best team that ever existed will be considered failure. And that became a bar we were setting. We set out a goal to say we're going to be the first team in the world to ever sell out the entire season before the season starts. No minor league team had ever done that. So we set these seemingly unreachable goals. And then, again, what prepared me for CAA is we had to staff it with people who believed in those goals, who weren't afraid of that challenge, that wanted to embrace what seemed impossible. And what's awesome is the people that started that team with are still running that team, Bob Murphy and Eric Deutsch, who are unbelievable leaders, but not people that people were betting on at the time. So it was an incredible experience where we launched this franchise, saw what was possible when you hire the right people that all have the same vision to move forward, got the wrong people off the bus when they weren't believing in that vision. Then when you were great, to try to keep and stay at that level, that's a whole other battle, because once we started selling out, we had 5,000 people waiting lists, keeping people motivated, that when that waiting list went out to 3,000 people, just getting into the character like the sky was falling, where some would be like, what are you getting so crazy about? We're sold out. So it's 3,000 people rather than 5, and finding that unacceptable, because that was going to start to be keys to failure. And so setting a bar super high and seeing who could chase it, that became big. And we did the same thing in Frisco, Texas, where we became very successful there. So started to get the confidence that we could grow businesses. I also had the leeway at Mandalay to form other businesses. We formed a lot of sports production companies, and hardly any worked. So I understood what failure was, and I also started to understand who to bet on, what type of people looked super smart, and figured, okay, they seem to know what they're talking about. Then all of a sudden they wouldn't be the person that you thought that they were. And you start to realize, one, Peter Guber would allow me to make those mistakes, was supportive the whole time, always said you're going to learn something in the process. There was a lesson he taught me when we were at Mandalay that said, he said, let's go try to bring an NFL team to Las Vegas. He said, we're not going to succeed. He's like, but through the exercise, we're going to learn a ton. We're going to meet mayors. We're going to meet governors. We're going to meet people at the NFL. We're going to learn a ton for something else great we're going to do. And that was an incredible lesson. It was so smart. And what it really teaches you, for everybody else out there too, is there is nothing wrong with any failures you're going through when you're young. Nothing. If you take the wrong job, it's okay. You learn that's not for you. So for everybody sitting there that thinks they have to have their path mapped out, you just don't. You do want to search for the passion, the one that makes you happy. So that was that gave me confidence. And why I say that is, by the time CAA called, now this was, as you know, because and for everybody out there, in the SBJ, which everybody in the industry reads, and I was reading and following this company, CAA, that was the best entertainment company in the world, was now getting into sports. And reading in the pages of the Sports Business Journal, they kept talking about what a big deal it is. And my experience in the agency world was nothing, except I had a really good friend that I met once I became president of CAA, I'm sorry, of Mandalay, because we were two young presidents of companies scared about what we were about to embark on. So a guy named Mike Levine ran a company called Van Wagner. And when we became presidents, there's a term called EBITDA, it involves profit and loss. That's really important when you're running a company. And we didn't understand, I didn't understand what that was. And so Mike was somebody, or Vino is somebody that I could talk to as a fellow president and say, what's this EBITDA? And ask all my insecure questions. So Vino had been with a company called SFX. And SFX was one of the last companies to do a sports roll-up in the agency business. And so I would talk to him about what the likelihood of success would be and what went wrong. And I was asked to come to CAA, and I was armed with some of this information. Are you frozen, Abe?
Nope. Are you? Do you not see me?
Oh, okay. No, your picture's frozen, so I can't see, but that's okay. So when CAA called, they were just investigating who they might pick to run this company. And they were just calling me to pick my brain. But in having the conversation, now a little bit of confidence of being a business builder, I started to quickly realize, I'm like, God, I like their philosophies. This person I'm meeting with, Richard Lovett, is this amazing guy. He took over the company at 36 years old at CAA, and he took it from a very well-known person named Michael Ovitz, who was the king of Hollywood. Him and his, I think, 4 or 5 partners were young, mid-30s, took over this company. Everybody thought they would fail, and they only grew it bigger. And I was meeting this guy who was running this company that was so clearly the best in the business, but he operated like he was in 5th place, like everything could go wrong. And I was super inspired by it. And all I wanted to do was help him. I loved what I was doing at Mandalay. But then when I was starting to daydream of what could happen, I gave him a list of names of who could be president. And I saw the list again in the Sports Business Journal of all the rumors of who was going to take it over. And he finally called me after one meeting and he said, would you ever consider doing this? I said, no, I have a job I love. And I would never leave unless I was the architect of something. Now, again, that was the same ignorance. It's now the biggest job in the world. I'm the minor league baseball guy. And how could I do this? But I just thought I saw something. I saw a blank piece of paper and I thought, I understand what we could build here. I could just see it. And people were interviewing for that job and they were leaving saying CAA is in real trouble. They don't know what they're doing. And all I kept thinking, I love they don't know what they're doing. They seem like they'll support management coming in. I think we could do this. And I called Mike Levine and my friend David Rohn, who was very good at television, and Mike Levine was very good at sales, and said, I have a crazy idea. Will you guys start meeting? And that's how those conversations happened.
And give the students what year? 2000 and what year was that? 2006?
7. 2000. Yeah.
I mean, and I'll just, how very humble. All the other names that were floated to run this agency were the big, bold-faced names of the sports business. And then I would consider these young sports, new generation, next generation of sports leaders were announced. It took the industry by surprise. And, Howie, we're about halfway through our discussion. We're starting to get a lot of questions here from the students, and I want to get to those. So let's fast forward a little bit to some questions like, you've been in this role, a very big role, a global role. What are the skills that you think you've used to be a good leader over your career?
Again, I think the constant theme is curiosity. I think willing to do the work yourself. When we started here, we were a startup, and I realized this from John Spolstra and Peter Guber, like there was no meeting they wouldn't go to. There wasn't any call they wouldn't make for the staff, and you had to follow the lead of how hard they worked. And so in the early years when it was, the company was myself, Paul Danforth, who is now the president of the company. He came from the New York Mets, Mike Levine. Like there was no time we weren't working, jumping on planes, going everywhere and anywhere. And it was our job to set the pace and to bring in the biggest deals and to make people believe the same thing we were saying at the Dayton Dragons. When we got here, we said anything short of building the best sports agency that ever existed. It didn't have to be the best, it had to be the best in everything we did. And anything other than that is utter failure. And so if you're gonna talk like that, you have to set the tone and the pace. And the leadership has also evolved over the years, and you really understand, like, you have to have empathy. You have to understand what your employees are going through. And I think because, like sitting in the same seat that our audience is sitting in, I can understand what it's like to be 20, nervous job. I understand what it's like being 22, making your first salary, wondering if you can meet your rent payment. Like, can I not have a roommate anymore? Can I afford that? Can I afford to go out twice a week? Can I go to happy hour? So that understanding what people go through, I think also, if you were just trying to be the best and show no empathy for having another part of life, who wants to follow those people? And fortunately for the leaders I found, always been that way. And I think it's important.
So 2021, what are you much better as a leader today than you were when you started at CAA in 2007? What skill sets are you better at?
Well, 100% I think would be, and this last year has really shown it, to be ultimately aware of how the world can affect you, how that can affect your mindset in business. And as a leader, your sole job is, how do you make people the best versions of themselves? And to make people the best versions of themselves is not just teaching them how to sell better. It's understanding that, okay, it could be anti-Asian violence that is weighing heavily on their brain, or the political environment, or Me Too movement, those are real things that stop you from being the best version of yourself if you don't feel heard, if you don't. So when we were coming up in the business, people might be thinking, you could get over that, and this is about work. That doesn't exist, and it's not fair. And I think our company and myself, everybody has a lot more growing to do, but I'm way, way, way more aware now of the importance of that for myself and for others.
Howie, I think you hit on a couple of key things for the students, just to reiterate for them. You want to work for people who have a prodigious work ethic. And Howie's in California, so he got up very early to do this. I've known him for years. He is a grinder. He just works, and that culture kind of goes through the entire organization at CAA. And the other element is listening. I think that good leaders listen. And to your point, Howie, I think as a leader, you have to listen to your workforce and to your colleagues. And, there's a good question here, Howie, from one of the students. Can you speak more about mentorship? What should students do to strengthen relationships with champion industry, like you mentioned, John or Peter? Which communication levels make student mentees stand out? So how would you want to communicate on something like that?
I think about some of the people that I mentor, and it comes in all different places. You want to stand out. So you have to ask yourself, am I doing something that makes this person who's giving up their time feel like? So you have to show the appreciation. Do something.
We lost Howie.
Yeah, I see you.
There you go. You're back. We lost you for a second, Howie. So I don't know if you could just.
Okay. I was saying, you have to invest you have to make sure that you stand out enough that the person, and appreciate enough that the person that's investing their time, because they are literally giving their time to you, to teach you, to want to see you successful. You want to make sure they know that it's appreciated, and do something that stands out to say, okay, if I dedicate my time here, I think this person's going to make the most of it, because you take great joy in that. There's somebody, Austin Brown, who works for CAA. He's an amazing agent, and he's young and keeps, leapfrogging like hurdles of doing things at a young age that many of his peers in his peer group, he's passed. I've met with him one-on-one for 3 years every month, because I saw something that if he could just get a little bit more, taught things a little bit earlier, he could really, really grow. It gives me great joy. Now, the fact that he reciprocates that and talks about the lessons makes me feel great. I don't need anything, like him just doing a good job and being ultimately really successful and hopefully really wealthy and accomplished gives me joy. So you want to make the person who's investing the time feel something. And that's not, it doesn't mean gifts. It just means an appreciation. And the person that you want to be your mentor has to be a person that wants good things for you. And you can't have the mentor like and you'll know that when you see it. And it doesn't mean you can't learn from somebody who doesn't have those traits, but the one who's going to be your champion is the one you see the look in your eye of saying they're selfless of what they just want for me. And there are so many people out there. I think there's more than people realize. They want to do that for you. And so when you search for it, like, I don't know how to tell you to get it, but I how to make the mentor feel like something great's happened. I remind John and Peter, I had lunch with Peter yesterday, and I was telling him, like, there's nothing I do that isn't from a lesson from you or John Spolstra. Nothing. So,
I think Howie makes a good point that it has to be almost mutually beneficial, because the mentor can learn just as much from the mentee as the mentee can learn from the mentor. And, one area that Howie and I have always talked with, like, love spending time with people, love spending with young people who love the business of sports and who love to want to talk about the business of sports or ask questions about the business of sports. Nothing makes me happier when a young person reaches out and says, hey, I read this in SBJ, like, what's your take on it? Rather than, hey, Mr. Madkour, I'm looking for a job. Do you have any jobs right now? So there's a different, type of
you hit a
communication.
great point, because that was the other thing. Like, when you're really successful, you're managing up and you're managing down. And so when I was coming up, I was pretty decent at, managing up, managing my bosses. And I take great pride, like, take Austin Brown again. He's during a lot of the social unrest, Austin, who's, I think he's 34, 35, but he's a young black colleague. And Austin was somebody who taught me a ton. We had a million discussions during this time, and to be able to learn back from him and him share his own thoughts, experience to help make me a better person and a better leader was unbelievably valuable to me. And Paul Rabel's another person, one of the founders of the PLL. He's young, but he acts like he's a 60-year veteran in the business. And he's another great person that I've enjoyed learning from as much as I hope I've taught.
So a couple more questions here, really good ones. So continue to speak about your themes of maybe leadership skills, because I get a couple of these. A great question from Brendan. What are some of the intangible qualities, Howie, that you look for in a young professional looking to make it into the industry? I mean, you've hit on some: curiosity, work ethic, but what are some of the others that you look for?
You want that they're comfortable. You want them to be comfortable in the room. You want to see it does jump off the page when they've done a series of activities. When I went down to UMass 2 years ago maybe and spoke to students and met a group of students, leaders before I spoke, and I'm like, they should be speaking. I mean, it really was. It's incredibly impressive when you say, wow, this is how you spent your time in college or in your summers. And if you could be involved in any sort of live events that you could be a part of to grow and actually have thoughts about it. If you come in and just say I was there, but you can't speak, again, if you just came in and said, I hand addressed envelopes at the Nets versus I sent out some ticket invoices, but we wrote a letter hoping to get a 4-to-1 response on it. That's a little different. It shows that you have an understanding of the business. So any interview you go on, if you can show an understanding of the role you're trying to get, that's a lot different. And it seems simple, but if you can understand the role you're trying to get and talk about it in a way as if you already have it, that stands out very much. It's very easy when somebody says they want to be an agent versus somebody who's working to try to be an agent for a lot of years. And it screams out during these interview processes.
Yeah, and I know I've watched Howie with just younger people, and your curiosity feeds back into them. You're always asking them questions, not just about themselves, but about the business and the business you're in. So the more I would say intellectually you can speak about the business of sports, you're always going to impress people, don't you think?
Yes, and through that, with some of the ways you could do it, like John Spolster's written a ton of books, any of the industry trades, like the Sports Business Journal and others that you can read. It's important that you could talk, learn, be able to understand who names are when somebody's talking about certain names. And another big thing is there's so many, your first jobs are just launching pads. Hopefully it'll be your last job. It's rarely the case, but your first jobs, you can literally go and do so many different things. You could be, again, I'm running an agency now. I started selling season tickets. So one thing, you just want to be as great as you could be at that job and learn. And that was advice I got when I was at the New Jersey Nets. When I first started having some success, before I started having some success, when I was 30th, the New York Knicks were hiring. And I went to go see somebody and said, hey, I could sell radio time for the New York Knicks, or WFAN, their radio station. And he said, how long have you been in your job? I said, 6 months. He said, before you jump, you got to be great at something. He's like, you're not great at your job yet, so you're already going to jump. How does that look? And that really stuck with me. And once I became, again, back to that lesson of once I became great at selling tickets, then everybody wanted to hear ideas. Then the president was taking these programs I wanted to form and implementing them. So in your first jobs, no matter what it is, just try to be great at it. And the world will open, no matter what it is. I was making $15,000 selling tickets. It wasn't glamorous. My territory is 2 hours away, but you just want to be great at it and good things happen.
All right, so we have less than 15 minutes left, Howie. So I'm going to go to a more lightning round of questions, meaning your answers can't be more than a minute or so we can get through a couple of them. Oh, you ready? Yeah. All right, so this is from Brian. Similar to your question right there, what advice do you have regarding finding the right role and the right organization to work for early on in a career? How do you understand their culture, and do you want to be a part of it? How do you make that decision?
That's a great question. I think it's important that you try to figure out, learn enough about the business, what you think you might be passionate about. And once you think you're passionate, let's say it was sponsorships, you use everything every resource that you have, whether it's me, somebody like myself, or you're emailing saying, I think I want to be in sponsorships. Think of these 3 companies. It's very simple for somebody like myself to say, AG is unbelievable. If you want to be on the property side, go to AG. The agency side, I think we're the best. Don't go to this company if you're depending on what your personality is at. So find people in your world, read the publications, find out who's the best, and then use your network, whether it's teachers. Teachers know people. Teachers have relationships with people like you and I, and suss those things out. And that's how you figure out the culture. Somebody who knows you might say, this is not a person for this company, or might describe the personality and be like, that'll never work. One of the names, Richard Lovett, ran by me to be president of CAA. I'm like, he's incredibly talented, the wrong person for you. So the cultural fits that people can help advise you on, so use your resources for it. It's not as hard as you think, and you know more people than you think.
From Randy, what's your perspective on ambition versus contentment? How do you work day and night, but take care of other aspects in your life?
How do you
work hard day and night, but also take care of other aspects in your life, work-life balance?
Well, that is on you. One, the ambition part is you have to look in the mirror, and that should be your hardest critic. And it's never been my bosses that have made me, or put the most pressure on me. It's always been me. Now, the same thing goes to the work-life balance. You have to make the conscious effort that success with one without the other, that's not success. Being super rich with bad family, that doesn't work. Being the best family but barely enough for your job, that doesn't work. So like, you have to literally just say to yourself and work for people. Like, you know, if somebody came to me and was trying to, you know, they're going home for their kids' games, like, of course, you don't ask. Like, that's what you do. And that was taught to me by John, by Peter, by Richard Lovett. I've always put myself in those positions. There's no pride. We've talked to people actually say, you got to get off the road. You got to be at home more. So a lot of that is on you. Don't work for somebody who thinks the opposite, because you're not winning at life if you're just making the money. But also, you can't just use work-life balance as an excuse to say, it's okay, I'm really fixing my other part of it. You want to be just as ambitious on both sides. And you could be the judge of that to find your happiness. But I encourage you to find it in both. One without the other is nonsense.
How have you looked to embrace diversity within your workforce?
I think no matter what company you talk to, everybody's approach could be, we need to do better. I think our company has done an amazing job as a company where we're trying to amplify messages about diversity. And we did a conference called CAA Amplify, which is a conference for leading execs and talent of color with the goal of creating a more inclusive world. And so one of the things we did was we realized a lot of people of color, when they're in the room, they're one of, and they might be incredibly talented. The president of production at Sony, I'm making up, and also then the president of the Washington Redskins. And we were like, if we could gather in a room a lot of one-ofs and talk about the messages, one, let them know how many they really are and keep this network going, and then amplify the messages and voices of what they want to get out there in the world, how amazing would that be? If you go and look on Google Amplify Conference, you'll be amazed at what you see this conference does and the gathering and what its message is. We've also, again, tried to use that from the messages to promote a lot more leaders within our company. Just in the past year, Lisa Joseph, who is amazing talent of ours in basketball, became the head of basketball, and then on the CAA board. Austin Brown, Tori Dandy is now running our football division. When you create leaders, they help foster even more leadership. So I think to do all those things, it's about amplifying the voices and the messages and to become way more aware than where the world was, you know, just 5 or 10 years ago. So that's really what you can do, is promote, hire. Over 50% of our interns are all people of color now. Make conscious efforts to make. It can't just be talk. You have to literally have goals and hit those goals and hold yourself accountable, which our company does.
We are running out of time. We got a lot of great questions. I probably won't get to them all, but we'll go really quick here. Give the group 3 or 4 sports business leaders you admire who they should be paying attention to.
Adam Silver, I think, is amazing. I think he's best of class. I think he's thoughtful. When he doesn't know something, he's not too proud to say he doesn't know, and will figure a solution. That's how the bubble happens. I think Jimmy Pitaro is super, super interesting because he's an incredibly genuine person, yet tough. And I think he's got an incredible challenge, and he's the right guy to try to face all the changing landscapes because he's so thoughtful. And who else? Paul Danforth of CAA is somebody. Here's a natural salesman who's just keep growing, you know, every year. He becomes better and smarter, and no cap on his talent.
If you were to pick or predict a hot sport, what would it be?
I really have my eye on the PLL a lot because I really enjoy their management. I like the sport, and I think they're doing all the right things to be successful as they grow. You talk about 2 curious people. Mike and Paul Rabel are as curious as they come, and they're passionate and unafraid. And those, as we've talked about, are incredible combinations.
The value of relationships in the sports business.
invaluable. Like it's everything. When I look at just the network, I had 24 years old. It was when I was sitting at UMass at the bar. It was myself, Sam Kennedy, who's now president or CEO of the Red Sox, and Paul Danforth and Chad Estes, who's running the Dallas Cowboys, and Chris Overholt and Abe Madkour, people I've met for 20 years when we were all just nothing, and having our first jobs, just had found that commonality in each other and supported each other, rooted for their success, and kept that bond going even when we're in competitive companies. And now we're the people running those companies. And it feels like yesterday we were all worried about what was going to happen just the very next year.
Any mistakes or regrets?
Whew. Tons of mistakes. I mean, a million. I mean, I've launched businesses that have been utter failures. I've hired people for plenty and lost $20 million in the investments. But regrets, no, only because of what we talked about was there's nothing that you don't learn from all of these mistakes that position you to be better on down the line. So I botched how CAA entered Europe. I only learned from that. And now I think if we didn't make those early mistakes, we wouldn't be as good as we are there now. So not really regrets, but too many mistakes to count.
Well, we all make mistakes every day. Let's finish with this one, Howie. This has been fun. This is a great question from Nicholas. How do you maintain your drive and commitment towards your goals, even as you face doubt and fear, and also with the industry tougher than ever with the COVID pandemic? How do you keep focused and push on and keep your staff motivated? Let's end with that.
You have to find the good in everything. You have to find what the challenge is. You have to always move forward, no matter what's going on in your world. It's harder as a leader because I'm very aware as I looked at my leaders, how are they walking down the hallways on Monday? Do they look nervous? Do they look upset? So whether or not you want to curl up in a fetal position, and you have to put on this brave face and move forward. And so as a leader or as just an employee, you just have to find the silver lining. So whether it's quarantine right now, I try to say, God, I'm with my family. I would have never family dinners the way I am. That's finding some good while death and financial despair are all around you. You can't let that defeat you. You just can't. You don't have a choice. So if you do, it's fulfilling. Then nothing good's going to happen. So if you can find the motivation to keep talking and keep seeming like you're going to jump out of your chair to do great things, there is no better way to defeat all bad things, bad feelings around you. So get active in your own rescue is the simplest way to put it. You have to, whether it's social things are dragging you down, then have conversations, have your voice heard, talk to people that you think are addressing these things in a proper way. And like-minded. And so be the captain of your own rescue in those things, because there's no other choice.
Great job. Well, thank you, Howie. And I thought it was a really good hour. I know the students took a lot away from it. I know I did. I think I'm going to turn it back over to Maddie to go to our next session. But well done, my friend.
Okay. Thank you, Abe. Always good to see you. And thank you, everybody at UMass. You guys are amazing.
Thank you both so much, Howie and Abe. That was an incredibly insightful talk. I learned a lot, and I can only assume all our attendees had a lot from both of you today. Thank you both so much for taking the time out of your days to be here. And a massive thank you to our title sponsor, Scout Sports and Entertainment, for supporting their continued support of the McCormack Sport Leaders Forum. For those who signed up for the Scout Sports and Entertainment case study, we will see you next at 11:15. For everyone else, we hope to see you at the Career Path Discovery Space starting at 12:45. Thank you both so much for showing up today. Have a wonderful day.
See y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.